Okay, this is John, and from All Points TV, and Laurel Federbush is a person that a lot of us who are regular viewers, and myself, should know her very well because she's all over the camp, all over the place. She's a harp player. She's a phenomenal harp player, and if you want to contact her for maybe booking her, we can always provide that information at the end of this. We'll have it on the tags. And a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, you were up here talking about your ideas about the flat Earth theory, which has generated a lot of views, by the way.
Oh, really? I'm glad.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But today, you're up here talking about, as a title page would say, on marriage equality. And Laurel Federbush is a conservative. And, I think it was about March, I saw you on Facebook. You actually posted the equality sign, now, which has been becoming to be associated with equality, marriage equality. And I was kind of taken back. I contacted you and I said, wow, when this happened? And you have an interesting story of why you are for marriage equality, even being a conservative. And I think people should hear this because I think you made a lot of valid points, and that's what I want to bring up to other people. When this is still going on, it's right now people are engaging in name calling, and I think that's kind of pointless, hurtful, and not necessary. And I think your reasoning, I think a lot of your reasons are probably because it resonate with a lot of other people who might consider themselves conservative and might be in a kind of find themselves in a no man's land. So why don't we start from there? What made you or brought you around for marriage equality?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not sure exactly whether I guess my politics are, right now especially are kind of eclectic, I'm thinking. I think I'm more on the conservative spectrum, but on this issue, I guess I would certainly be considered a liberal right now, and some other issues as well. So I think I'm more just trying to think for myself and not particularly try to fit into any particular label. So I guess that's where I am right now. At one time, I was very politically active. I was a Republican delegate in our county, and I worked very hard for the John McCain, for in the election for him versus President Obama, now President Obama. And I was very politically active, and then at some point I started dropping out, mainly because I didn't have the time, but also it was just very confrontational. Like politics is confrontational, and I have a very confrontational side too. Like when I'm in my political mode, I get very militant, maybe. I say and do things that I probably wouldn't do in other circumstances. I can be a real fighter when I want to be, but sometimes that's kind of disruptive to my life. I guess I sort of wanted to be away from that somewhat, so I sort of started dropping out of politics. But people who are Facebook friends with me probably wouldn't say that I'm not political. I often do post very political things. They probably think I'm a lot more political than I am, and if I have an opinion about something, I tend to be upfront about it, and I sometimes appear on our local Ann Arbor, community television network to speak my mind if I have something to say. So I'm not sure if I'm political so much as opinionated, maybe. So.
And I've known you for a few years now, and I remember when I first met you, were just coming basically on to me more. You were actually leaning towards more of the conservative views on many issues. But you kind of come out of a family and a background. You live in the Ann Arbor area, which is noted for being
ultra liberal,
basically like the Berkeley area of Michigan. Basically,
right, yeah.
Not the city of Berkeley, but the city of Berkeley in California. I'm talking about.
Okay.
And and actually, in some ways, I guess they took polls and they've actually found that parts of Michigan actually are more liberal, considered more liberal or progressive than even Berkeley, California, which I was surprised by.
I would believe that in Ann Arbor because when I did. Well, I used to be kind of not even liberal, like farther to the left of liberal. Like I guess I was in the Green Party officially at one point, but the liberals were too moderate for me. I was more to the left of them. I never identified as being a communist. I guess that just seemed too repressive, or I was never a communist, but I was definitely on the left. And then through a series of circumstances, I went to the right, and I guess I'm not very good at moderation. I sort of went from being an extreme leftist to being, pretty much maybe, I don't know, an extreme rightist, but, never very much in the middle. I went from being, all that way to all that way. So, and now maybe I'm trying to think for myself a little bit more. I don't know.
Well, actually, I think that is pretty accurate because on many issues, I mean, I could say I by myself I would agree with more on the left. I mean, I believe in marijuana legalization, which typically has been identified with being on the left, but to me it's being a true libertarian, to me a conservative should be the libertarians. It shouldn't be like, the country club mentality kind of stuff. It should be a person who's conservative. What are you conserving? What are you trying to preserve? Is the Constitution, and that's a way I think I try to avoid a lot of the thornier, issues about gay marriage or gay, marriage equality. Is that I try to stay the course of actually. That's the church, and I agree that I don't believe in church weddings for gays. That's why I'll state that outright. But this is like totally a different thing. It's like basically they want recognition for the government, which I think is basically, I think you're inviting a whole problem into your situation already when you're asking the government to recognize you, or you're demanding recognition from the government. Well, they'll recognize you, but they're going to demand something for that. So that's the reason why I have issue with the gay marriage. But do you want to go into what kind of started triggering your rethinking of the marriage equality?
Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that. First, I want to say that a lot of churches, though, are willingly recognizing gay marriages in synagogues and temples as well. So, whether you want to force it on churches or synagogues that don't want to do that, I tend not to think the government should be, trying to force religion, religious institutions to, they shouldn't be trying to run religious institutions. That's unconstitutional. But a lot of these religious institutions are recognizing gay marriages on their own. And I'm proud that our synagogue is one of the ones that I think is either has done it or is leaning in that direction. But so anyway, I just want to say that. But yeah, I'm sorry. So could you repeat your question?
Well, you're thinking. I mean, it's like back in March, like I said, I saw it's a red background with the equal sign. It's becoming to be associated with the marriage equality movement and thinking. And I was like kind of taken back because you actually raised the ire of many of your own family members who are more identified with the left or progressive side. And I remember I always really thought that was kind of heroic of you to actually stand up against that tide. Because, I mean, I know a little bit about Ann Arbor. I mean, I grew up on the periphery of that because we used to go visit Ann Arbor for my mom's doctrine when I was a kid. And I saw the foment there being on the left back then. So you were raised in that environment. So basically to think anything outside of it, almost like you're all probably anathemized.
Yeah.
Pretty close to it.
Well, I guess, as I wasn't, when I entered my phase of being very much on the right politically, that's when I was against gay marriage and, pretty much against homosexuality, period. Before that, I wasn't. When I was a little kid, I remember having a conversation with, somehow we're talking about marriage. I was probably like 5 years old, and somehow it came up like, like whether like two women could marry or two men could marry. And they said something like, well, what would be wrong with that? Or, why couldn't they? And, I guess my friend said, oh, that would be gross. Ew, but I guess as a kid, I couldn't see anything at all wrong with it. And that was pretty much my attitude for, I guess much of my life. And, I had friends who were gay. Two of my very good friends in college were a lesbian couple, and I would hang out with them all the time. So the thing of being, sort of anti-gay was that came, I guess, when I became conservative, and I guess, and at that point, some of my, I guess, maybe repressed feelings or attitudes I hadn't really given much thought to before, sort of came to the forefront. Like, there was some of the gay people I had known, or, like I grew up in this very, sort of progressive house. My mom was an ultra feminist, and so we had friends who were a lot of her friends were what I would consider sort of anti-male or, sort of rebels, and there were, so a lot of the people we knew what struck me as, like with some of the, feminists would have been like anti-male. So there was sort of like an anti-family aspect to it. And, I guess, I was just sort of remembering feeling as a kid sort of uncomfortable with some of the people who seemed, maybe a little bit threatening to the idea of a family. Because, when you're a kid, you're dependent on your family. So, you don't want to, anything that's a threat to, like mommy and daddy or something is a little bit of a threat. So I guess I sort of started seeing it that way, like, and so. And I had known a couple of transgender people, and they were, one of them was very much into sexual masochism, and the other one, seemed just to be afraid of men, period, and I, so I just started thinking, well, that's, this whole thing is not a healthy lifestyle. It's not a healthy way to be, being either gay or transgender. It's not, I just sort of, I don't know. I guess I'm a person who sort of craves stability. I'm probably not the most stable person, so, in my own life. And so things that make me feel secure or stable, I guess the conservative, pro-family, pro-family values, those ideas at that point in my life, they seemed very appealing to me, and the gay lifestyle or transgenderism or any of those things would have been like not something I thought was a good thing. So
See, I've always been more on the conservative side, but I remember thinking as a kid, when a guy wanted to get a dig at another guy, he'd call them, you're acting like a girl, what are you, the more explicit term for a female, using their genitals, their genitalia as the referencing point for being that. And I started thinking, probably 10, 11 years old, it's like, why is it necessarily being a negative thing if somebody is feminine? Not just, why are kind of these attributes that we would typically identify as being female or belonging to a female considered in a negative sense if somebody other than a female, indicates they have that or is demonstrating that. And so even I started thinking about that whole dialect or that diametric or that dynamic, that dynamic, it's like basically there was like a pronouncement of, desirable or undesirable on attributes that were considered male or female. Well, then when I started going to school, I saw a lot of the people around me, like a lot of the teachers were in the 70s were pronounced, articulating that they were on the feminist side. And I saw this anti-male bias and this this idea of like wanting to basically supplant a patriarchy with a matriarchy. So they weren't even striving for equality. They just wanted to go from one extreme to another.
Right.
And that's when I had opposition, even as an early kid. Mm-hmm. And a young kid, and my mom had a teachers conference one time. The teacher said, "I really like John. I like to engage him, but he seems to be hostile to me." And my mom said, "Well, he thinks you're a man hater." And she goes, "Well, why does he think that?" Well, she was a admitted feminist. she wore the sign, the symbols of that at that time, even then. And my mom told her, and she goes, "He just says he doesn't have a problem with a female. He just has a problem with you. He's thinking you don't like males."
Right, yeah.
And the woman basically was taken back, and then from that, after that meeting, everything kind of changed between her and I. We actually became very close, but, I didn't want to tell her that. I couldn't use exact terms as a kid, but I saw that she didn't like men, and it's because, she was reacting to what she's seen as perceived historical repression of females by males, and that's a tendency they translate in that now they take that abstraction and try to project it on one a group of individuals.
Right.
And I thought that's what I saw and heard in every social movement, as a child. And I think you touched upon that. You saw this kind of anti-family, impetus, this amongst the gays and lesbians. But
I think I sort of blurred the idea of hating men and being a lesbian. Like at some point, I think I thought that all of my mom's friends were lesbians, and some of the ones that, I would consider man haters. I was mentioning some of them to my mom, and she said, no, they weren't lesbians. They were, they were married. They were very heterosexual women. So the fact that they were very sort of militant and maybe in my mind kind of anti-male. I don't know if they might not have seen themselves that way, but maybe to me they seemed that way, just maybe just sort of militant in a certain way. But it didn't mean that I mean, the women who struck me that way weren't necessarily lesbians. So I think I sort of at some point blurred the two things in my mind that weren't necessarily the same thing, So, I guess, hating men and being a lesbian are not actually the same thing.
So, well, years ago, I got the book called Sexual Persona. It was Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson. It was written by a woman named Camilla Paglia. And she's a professor of humanities at some college. I think it's in Pennsylvania or someplace on the East Coast. But anyway, her basically she writes for Salon magazine, or she contributes quite online magazine Salon, and she's actually in the different interviews. She's a feminist, anti-feminist feminist. And she's also she's bisexual, but she has a tendency to be in more lesbian relationships. So she does, but she says that basically she goes against the grain, like people like Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin. They had this idea about all sexual encounters was rape on the woman. This very anti-sexuality thing, and Camille Paglia says a true feminist should embrace that. The true feminists actually strove originally for for women to choose their career path or what they're going to do in their lives, not necessarily just out of hand, reject being a mother that stays at home. Right. So she saw that they went so far as to they were trying to commandeer the movement of equality, just to actually go on the camp that they found most the best for themselves, and they try to force everybody into that same mold. So I mean, I really appreciate Camilla Paglia, because she's very hard to pin down, and I think I kind of see you like that, because I mean you're all over the place on the political issues, and you got good reasoning behind it. I don't know if you want to go too much into it, but there was a personal story behind you actually coming on more to embracing marriage equality. I don't know if you'd want to go into that, or...
Yeah, I guess I do, because, like I said, just until very recently, until a little over a month ago, I was, very much anti-gay and, anti-gay rights, anti-gay marriage, because I just saw it as being this very negative thing. And, I saw it as something that maybe, gay rights activists were trying to force on kids, or, force the gay agenda into the schools and all this stuff. And there were a couple of friends of mine on Facebook, this married couple, and they were both, very liberal in a number of ways, but especially on gay rights. And they had. I sort of know them. I don't really know them very well, but they're people I sort of know casually, and I really admire them. Really smart, really wonderful people, and they have a very solid family. They had 2 kids. Let's see, one of the kids was a teenager, the other one was not yet a teenager, and. But anyway, yeah. So I really admire these people, and we're Facebook friends, and they were both very much into gay rights, and I could just sort of see that from their Facebook posts, and being very anti-gay, I was sort of thinking, well, gee, why are they trying to force this gay agenda on their kids and everything? And the older boy, the teenager, he would sometimes post gay rights things on Facebook, and they was thinking, gee, he must be so brainwashed, why? But nonetheless, they seemed like this very stable, solid family, and a family that you'd really admire, and so it didn't seem like they were doing anything wrong. They seemed like they're just the most wonderful parents, and so. Anyway, but recently the kid came out and wrote a Facebook post saying, something like, I don't know the exact wording, but something like I want to reveal something like I want to stop hiding part of who I am, and I'm coming out officially as gay. And that was actually really kind of shocking to me. I would never, for one thing, you don't think of kids as, at least I didn't. I mean, probably everyone else is more more sophisticated than I am, but I wouldn't have thought of a kid as identifying as being gay or being not gay, for that matter. Just kids are kids. So but anyway, this kid, he did that, and I was kind of shocked, and I was sort of not sure how to process it. Like, I was thinking, for one thing, it's a terrible idea for a kid to say that on Facebook. It's very, like, what kind of things is he opening himself up for? And, this, I was just not sure how to process it. But then, the more I thought about it and, sort of sank in, I really admired this kid. And I thought this was just the most breathtaking act of courage. And, I was just really, and I thought it was wonderful those parents, were. Well, at first I didn't think it was so wonderful those parents were supporting him being gay, or supporting the gay cause. Like, I was thinking, like, maybe they should have tried to talk him out of it or something. But, the more I thought about it, the more I thought this is just wonderful, that he has the support of his family. So many people who are gay don't have the support of their family. And from what I've read since then, you have gay people have a much better chance at a happy life, a long happy life if they do have the support of their family and their friends and their community. A lot of the things that are associated with being gay, that people who are anti-homosexuality tend to trot out all these statistics on what a horrible, unhealthy lifestyle it is. But though, and some of them are like alcoholism, depression, suicide, and things like that. But those tend to be linked to situations where gay people don't have the support of the people close to them. And so, I think that the more we can be, just treating them like people, like anyone else, the better it'll be for them and, for the world, and the less of any of those problems, will continue to exist. So.
See, I mean, I'm more of a conservative myself, but many times I've heard some people say horrific things. I'm a person who basically believes that you should state your expression, your opinion, but some of the more conservatives I've seen these. And I believe in the Bible. I do. I believe in the Bible. I believe in the life story. Christianity. I believe in all that. So let me put that way. But I just never seen in any other circumstance we're supposed to denounce divorce nowadays as much as they are trying to denounce, gay lifestyle. Okay, if all things are sin, they seem to be very choosy or picky on what they're denouncing.
Right. That's very true.
Because let's face it. The Catholic Church, for example, has this, real strict, thing, always has and still has to some degree, this real strict sense of it's a severe wrong to have a divorce. Well, then when the Puritans and stuff like that and the other Protestant groups started, you had a person like John Milton, who was a Puritan, one of the Puritan writers, actually write a defense of divorce because he was going through that himself. So, if you want to look at the teachings of Christ itself, it says God hates divorce. But the thing is, that's one of those things that's become so acceptable. Everybody, my own family. My mom was married to some other man before she met the guy who became my dad, who my dad was. And I'm a product of a divorce, essentially. A divorce. So, there's all things, and I'm not saying everything's okay, it's just drop the standards. But what I do say that it's, we seem to be, one thing that used to be such a huge obstacle with, so many years ago, is now not even considered given a second thought. Years ago, it was a big thing for people not to engage in sex before marriage. No, I don't know hardly anybody who holds that. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, right. I'm not going to say that. It's probably the best way to go through life is to follow those teachings. You probably avoid a lot of problems. Just in the pragmatic view, if you want to just totally cut that out, the perspective of that, the spiritual realm, if you don't have sex before marriage, you're probably not going to get pregnant, get a sexually transmitted disease. You're not going to have to go through all that. So there's probably a good reason not to engage in those behaviors.
Right.
But we just seem to be very picky and choosy. Gay lifestyle, being gay might be wrong, but so is overeating, so is excessive drinking, so is excessive swearing, so much as also holding animosity towards people around you. And we all fall into those things. See, we have an easier time with things we ourselves engage in and just overlooking them. We strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. We do that in the biblical sense. That's the true statement. We have a tendency to try to be dismissive of our own faults.
Yeah, I guess my outlook's somewhat less biblical. Like as of now, the part of me, the way I am now, as opposed to a month ago. I guess I think that gay love is beautiful, like any other kind of love. It's a really beautiful thing. It's not a sinful thing. Of course, there can be sinfulness in it, just like in any love relationship. I've discussed these things with my rabbi, and he's very much he's very much for gay rights. He's supportive of gay marriage, and I think he said that he'd be willing to to officiate a gay marriage. I'm not sure if he's done so yet or if he's planning to, but he was saying that there's still sexual morality. Like even if you say that there's you support the gay lifestyle, just like the heterosexual lifestyle. That it doesn't mean there's no sexual morality. It doesn't mean that you can't have sexual morality. I mean, it's the same thing. You don't have, promiscuity would be wrong. It's wrong to force yourself on someone else. The sexual morality still exists. It's not like licentiousness. Anything goes. It's just allowing for the reality that there are different kinds of love. So.
Well, a good point here too, like about extremisms, either side. There's some Catholic writers, like some fathers of the church would actually say that a man lusting after his own wife is a sin. But then if you want to look at it through the lens of a psychology, if you're objectifying the wife because you have this desire for, then you're actually not seeing her as a full person. You are doing
Right.
damage to her.
Right.
So there's basically objects of lust, but then again, our culture is built. If you see now, one time it was like 70% of the internet content of the internet was 75% was connected to pornography. And that's all aspects. I'm not, just narrowing down to straight sex or, gay sex. We're talking 75% of all the content on the internet at one time. I don't know if that still holds true. Because, we put out shows out there I don't think most of the people would consider pornographic unless they're really extremist. So basically it's like we've overlooked. Like I said, we're so comfortable with our own. C.S. Lewis said there's going to be more people going to hell for being a backbiting and holding on grudges and all these other things, and there's for people going to hell for being a murderer or rapist, and that's true. So in that sense, it's basically it's got to balance out. You basically got to step back and try to stop that from happening, be such like an overarching concern that you're denouncing this one particular sin so much that you're becoming something pretty pathetic in the process.
And even if you believe, as people are free to believe that, gay sex is wrong, I don't think there's anything in the Bible that says that you can't interact with a gay person. You can't serve them pizza, to use one of the most common examples. You can't fix their car. Like, there's nothing in the Bible saying that you can't provide goods and services to a gay person. It just so I think people are sort of twisting religion to mean something that it doesn't actually mean. So, if you don't want to engage in gay sex, then don't do it. It's just, but it doesn't mean that you have license to, to treat a gay person like they're, like they're anything less than a full-fledged person. So.
Well, see, I go back to the one chapter, one quote in the Bible that says, "Let your good works, so I'm before men, they may glorify your Father who is in heaven." Mm-hmm. Well, being hateful and stuff like that, there's the expression of hating the sin but loving the sinner. Okay, mm-hmm. So some people say use that as an excuse to dismiss saying there's any opposition to anybody's activities. And I say you have a right to oppose her. Basically, the best way to oppose it is not to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. But you're sitting there denouncing everybody else, so screaming at that they're doing something so wrong. At what level are you just basically going to open yourself up to doing something just as dreadful as or even more dreadful than you're accusing them of? Right. I have a hard time with that. Basically, I think you can only control your own actions. You're only responsible for your own actions. Throughout the Old Testament, the New Testament, through almost all religious teachings, you're never held accountable for somebody else's actions. Judaism, which Christianity branches off from, never said you're responsible for your actions of the neighbor. You can only responsible how you interact with your neighbor on your own level, but you're not held accountable for his or her action.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't see that's how I have to balance it out, because I can't. There's so many things out there. We were talking about that earlier. There's so many things I've seen growing up that most people non-religious, no, I don't believe, will find appalling. But at some point, you can say I can only not do this myself, and I try to stay away from those people who are doing it because I just find it egregious. But at some point, nobody can hold you accountable for it. That's the reason why I don't like the assumption that, like, the white privilege, like all white people are the same. Well, not everybody who's white belongs to a country club and has a trust fund, okay? Right. So, there's a chapter in the book of Ezekiel that talks about each man is held accountable to their own actions. And so you have Christian pastors and some quarters trying to say that this group is responsible for that, and it's like, no, the individual is responsible for being that way or this way. So that's how I have to balance it out. In a religious sense, a philosophical sense, and an ethical sense, categorical statements. We all like to do that. We all do that. We all like to put this group, that. I'm not them. They're this. But let's face it, there's elements of all those things within us.
Right. Yeah, and I guess at this point, I think the way I was not very long ago was actually kind of paranoid, like, seeing this gay agenda that's out to harm everyone in this horrible way, and now I just see it as there are these people who just want the same rights as everyone else, and they're very vulnerable people, and it's not like there's one organized, mass out there. It's just, a lot of individuals who are being hurt a lot of the time, and, who would just like to be treated the same as everyone else. And, that reminded me of something you said reminded me of a point I wanted to make about being conservative and being for gay rights. It's often portrayed like this is some, really radical new thing, but gay people and I guess transgender people too, or the whole community has been around throughout history. This is not a new thing. This is as old as humankind. I guess the only new thing is how we're going to treat people like that. Whether we're going to treat them like they're just not worthy of basic human rights, or whether they're just like everyone else and their love should be treated as sacred and special like anyone else's love. So
See, being a libertarian on the branch of the conservative on the libertarian branch of the conservative, I guess you could say, because I think being a libertarian is basically being a conservative. Because it's people who look at the conservative movement now as judging it from after the fact of since the late 1980s, when it was basically there were a large influx of evangelical Christians coming into the the Republican Party, for example. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party beforehand basically was very kind of indifferent to people's day-to-day life. They just wanted to have so many laws that were really enforced. The rest basically was all left to the individual. They wanted to follow the mandates set forth the Constitution of having strictures upon the federal government. But now, because there is always an overflow, though, between a person's personal life and how it impacts society. So that's kind of, you can't totally be dismissive of that either. So it is a tightrope walk. It really is. At a certain point, one group can get so much acceptance that nothing they do or say is challenged or questioned, because they become like sacred cows.
Right.
And I think that's wrong.
Right, for sure. If a gay marriage and a heterosexual marriage, you'd want them to be treated the same way. Like, there shouldn't be different rules for a gay marriage. It shouldn't be more permissive rules than for a heterosexual marriage or anything like that. So, for sure.
I just like to warn people who actually advocate for gay marriage. It's like when you get this, and then the people are getting married, then they have to come into the unfortunate circumstance of getting divorced. Don't expect to have some kind of escape clause.
Right.
I mean, this is going to be a marriage. You're basically, that's what you're thinking about when you're looking at marriage. When the governmental side of it, the reason why the government acknowledges unions, marriages, matrimony is basically so they can tax it, so they can regulate it, so they can help you split up the properties afterwards, because that's a contract, and now they got to be involved with that. So I mean, it's like you're opening, basically the gay marriage advocates, I would say you're opening up a can of worms that you might not be able just to use an emotional argument against happening. Okay, you're going to basically, and you already struck about it, it's basically they have to live by the same rules that applies to heterosexual marriages.
Yeah, I think I've heard. I'm not sure what the status is now, but at least there were some states where gay divorce didn't exist. Like there was gay marriage, but no gay divorce, and that was problematic for a lot of people. So, hopefully those things will all be straightened out. So,
but it just struck me though. It's like marriage has always been between males and females, even in societies where they weren't so adamantly against homosexual behavior, like Greece and Rome's often cited. Mm-hmm. So that was they still produced children. They were in marriages that produced children because the state was the overarching concern, in those societies, in that time frame and everything else. So the homosexual behavior was tolerated. But if you wanted somebody to skewer somebody, to like slam them or make a cutting remark, they were referred to them as buggers of boys and other derogatory terms. Mm-hmm. So they basically didn't have this acceptance. A lot of the apologists for the, for a lot of the gay agenda people or the gay people wanted to try to bring about that there was always this. No, there was no differentiation on that. There was, okay. So I mean, historically there was. So there's everybody's basically not everybody was on board for it. Okay, obviously that those societies procreated, so they did have normal or relatively functioning family units in those societies. Mm-hmm. So I mean that's what I'm saying, that some people are going to go to the extreme and think this is totally on par with, and there's going to be more problems developing. Say gay couples want to adopt or find somebody who's a surrogate that now they'll raise a child that's a product of this surrogate relationship. So there's going to be thorny political and legal issues coming out of this. But then there's everything humans do. I mean computers and everything, and computer technology has got thorny issues where all developing your privacy. I can think of 3 things right now, privacy issues about, on the internet. Do you have any expectation for privacy or security, cybersecurity? What's permitted on the internet? Is there any supposed to be any kind of filters or anything? So I mean, those are 3 issues right now that we're dealing with something we're constantly using. Mm-hmm. So when this is an addition thing, you're going to have some unintended consequences. I don't think a lot of people are going to really anticipating.
Okay, I guess you mentioned gay adoption. One of my friends and I were invited to the Seder at the home of one of the women from our synagogue and her lesbian partner, and they have this beautiful daughter, who's a teenager, and she's just the most beautiful girl, and she's very happy, very good musician, and gay couples and lesbian couples can raise children wonderfully. So I think that raising children is not. There are a lot of children right now who need homes, so I don't think that that's any barrier to calling them a real couple or a real family. So
see, that wasn't my intention. I'm just saying, basically what I was saying is there's legal ramifications that somebody's going to try to use. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, basically politics and legal things that have a lot in common. You try to seek an advantage over your opponent. You're trying to use a different argument, or you're trying to turn an argument against them. Okay, those are 2 of the chief weapons. I mean, it is. If anybody doesn't think the legal thing is basically a lot like war, like a conflict, it is. It's confrontationally based. Okay, even if it's civil law, it's confrontationally based.
Right.
So I mean, there's the thorny issues. But there was a kid I grew up with. His mom she was born before an era where it was accepted to be a lesbian, but she had several children through one guy. And then she decided to basically own up to being a lesbian, coming out of the closet. And this is like 35, 40 some years ago. So these kids are like now in the world, and they have a dad, but now his mom's divorced from dad, and she's with a woman. And he grew up. He's married to a woman. He's got kids with her. Basically, very kind of a blasé, kind of a boring family actually.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and his mom's, she's still with the same partner she's been with for years. So I mean, and we accepted that here. We some people had problems with it and called their names, and she bore that well. I mean, it was unfortunate because I think it's. Then calling me, I don't understand. I don't understand why you think everybody's going to appreciate your opinion of them so much they're going to change their life to be in accordance with what you think is right. I always thought that was weird, So I mean, but they lived. I mean, they had a very this guy, last night I tell you, he still's got the same issues every married guy knows. His wife complains he doesn't spend enough time with her, but he's like, the kids are happy, they're going to school and getting good grades and they're being fed well, and he's not abusing them, she's not abusing them, and they're adopting, they're learning strategies to be a good adults. I mean, so I've seen all sides of this issue,
right.
So I think one good thing about during this conversation though that we haven't veered off to like this this derogatory blistering attacks on like using the scripture or trying to use some people are going to just totally dismiss those kind of things anyway. You got to anticipate. You got to basically stick, and I think that's a healthy. What we're talking about is a very healthy way of examining things. I mean, there's going to be issues cropping up, but
yeah. Oh, before just one thing I want to say. I guess right now back to the idea of politics. My politics right now is kind of confusing because right now I'm very much for gay rights and marriage equality but I'm also very much pro-life. I see unborn babies as deserving of protection, and right now in the political spectrum, those two things are diametrically opposed. Like I don't see any of the candidates out there who are pro-life and pro-marriage equality, and I hope that'll change. I hope there will be. I'm sure there are a lot of issues like that. There's the Republicans and the Democrats, and and people as individuals might agree with one of the party on this issue, another party on that issue, and so you can't have a candidate who's going to speak for you on all issues. And, it'd be nice if there was some more variety, like everyone didn't have to toe the party line in all respects, and we could have some, better choices, I think.
So, I mean, I think David Horowitz calls it, he has a term for that, it's called heterodox. Basically, it's like, orthodoxy is straight thinking. If you want to, you go to an orthodontist to straighten out your teeth, so the prefix for that word means to straight. So straight thinking on anything is basically not seeing the broader picture.
Right.
So, I mean, I think anybody who's intelligent is going to have heterodox. I mean, I'm a conservative, but I'm all on board for drug legalization because I think that drug legalization to me is the best way to actually address the problem, prevent more corruption on the government, actually getting people who might need help because they have engaged in drug use to get help if they find it to become a problematic thing in their lives. Keeping it buried and I was very much on board for the minimum sentencing things. I was on board for the RICO statutes in the 80s. I thought that was a great thing. Now when you actually see how they're really fully worked out in reality, you realize they have these very negative unintended consequences. And so I think that, and I think there's going to be unintended consequences with the gay marriage issue. I really do. I mean, the gay marriage equality thing. I think there's going to be, and there's going to have an impact on society that might be negative or positive, or very something that's going to cause us to have to pause and consider. We're going to have other issues develop. I just don't see how anything in human development, though, or progress, or human history, as people go along this continuum or whatever, I don't see anything that's going to escape that.
That's true. Yeah.
So I just,
Good and bad comes with everything. So
I just basically, I can't say I jump on board fully for gay marriage, but then also I don't want to be one of these people who's going to come across look like an insane idiot by just thumping some book that people are going to be rejecting, or just trying to make an argument that basically is going to fall by the wayside because everything is going to have problems. I think there's going to be more problems down the road. There's always going to be more problems.
Right.
That's the hallmark of being human. You're going to have problems.
Right. I guess marriage equality, one of the ideas is it'll help alleviate some problems, though, by if a gay couple can be considered married in every sense of the word, then presumably it'll cut down on promiscuity, and the promiscuous lifestyle has been responsible for a lot of disease and deaths, and so if it can cut down on some of those horrible tragedies, I think that would be a very good thing. As you said, there will be unintended consequences of of anything, but the status quo causes a lot of misery and a lot of death and destruction for people who who aren't able to whose lifestyles aren't going to fit the one man, one woman, so you can't just have a kind of marriage that works for a few people, but have everyone else, just living in the shadows. I don't think that that's a healthy thing either.
Yes, yeah, it's basically, another thing is maybe it's a sense of fatalism, but basically the genie's been let out of the bottle. The toothpaste's been squeezed out of the tube. Whatever analogy you want to go with, it's not something that's going to go back. It's not going to go away.
Right.
Civil rights. Let's face it, a lot of people try to prevent that from hitting. And it wasn't the group that was now identified as being the Republicans. It was the Democrats who were.
Right, yeah.
They tried to prevent the civil rights movement from going on. They've somehow commandeered it now. Look like they're the heroes, but
right, yeah.
That's a different issue. But I think this is a really good conversation now, Laurel. I mean, and I definitely encourage you to come in because you're always thought provoking, and I like the fact that you have such a wide variety of interest, and you are eclectic on your views. Because, I don't think anybody is one group of labels. I really don't. I don't want to sound like too new ageist, and then I turn my nose up at somebody saying, "Oh, but when I said somebody would said that a few years ago, but truth comes from different sources. And if to say anybody has got a monopoly on it, it's just being stupid. Short-sighted, being ignorant deliberately, and I guess that's stupidity if you're ignorant deliberately. So anyway, if you have any other issues you want to bring up too, and I know there's going to be some fallout on this, so I say prepare if you want to prepare for coming back again. I definitely would open that up, for you.
Right. And I'm just talking about my own feelings and my own experiences. I'm not an authority on on any of this. So this is just me.
This is a sociological thing. Basically, there is no. It's sociology, psychology are scientific, quasi-scientific. You employ certain measures of scientific methodology, but you have to examine what people's feelings are on this, so psychologically and sociologically, because those are important issues. Those are important things. We're not basically chemicals that are going to definitely act in a certain way when added together. The emotional responses are going to cause a human to have actions or inactions, and those are the things those are the things that are problems. The actions of people are the thoughts. We're supposed to guard our thoughts, but let's face it, we are crimes only when it happens. When somebody actually takes it upon himself to commit an action. So basically, you got to see what the potentiality for people's reactions or actions are going to be. So that's it's like you got to examine those. Allow those to be aired so they can be addressed. Maybe fears allied, put to rest, or maybe there's concerns that they're addressing that's got to be addressed. So that's that you got to have. You got to have a dialogue.
Right.
What happens in this country though is basically one group labels others, and that the other group's so suppressed and so repressed they can't speak out, even if they have a legitimate concern. And and that's what I'm trying to do here with All Points is trying to encourage people to have this debate. And I don't think there's everybody on board.
Right.
But to recognize us as human beings and saying, guess what? I can't go this far to silence that person because they can do that to me too. So anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And also, you have friends down in Ann Arbor who see on the opposite sides, or maybe the same side, or maybe more vehemently for pro gay marriage. So certainly encourage them to contact me so we can do this with them. Talk with them.
Sure.
Right? Thank you.
Thank you.